that can be edited out. Anyway, this is Nintex Live Without a Net. I said no slides. I meant no slides. My name is Mike Fitzmaurice. I'm the Vice President of Product Technology for Nintex, and if some reason you want to get in touch with me later, I am Mike Fitz at Nintex.com, and I post in bursts. I'll have lots of activity followed by zero activity, but if you want to follow me on Twitter, Mike Fitz. All right, that's it in terms of signage, unless somebody really wants me to illustrate something best done in text. For the next hour, this is nothing but demo. The turnout looks pretty darn healthy, and I'm assuming that's for, well, A, you like demos. You might have heard of us. You want to see what we're doing, and we just announced a product today called Nintex Forms. And yes, I'm demoing Nintex Forms in this. We didn't want to talk about it early, so the word forms appears nowhere in the description of this session. But yes, we are definitely talking about forms during this set of demos. So I'm going to talk about the all-up story involving workflow. I'll talk about connectivity with the internet and Nintex Live and a whole bunch of other fun stuff, and definitely Nintex Forms. But the first thing I'm going to do is build something with absolutely, positively zero preparation, well, as opposed to having actually, built it before and then torn it down. So what we're going to do, I thought about this long and hard. I thought to myself, and I said, self, especially because we have people filing in, the setup's important. If I started clicking right at quarter to the hour, that we'd leave a lot of people in the dust. That's okay. I don't mind people coming in. God knows I do it. But here's the deal. I could come up with a really dense, dry, dusty business problem and show you how we can add a lot of business value to it. In fact, I'll do that later. I've got lots of examples that are tightly coupled to different business problems. You can use Nintex workflow solution technology for many, many things. But how about we start with something fun? This is the last session of the day, and I'm guessing you guys might be tired. So if I get too dry, that's not good. So, who wants to Rochambeau? For those of you not familiar with that, that's another term for rock, paper, scissors. I'm going to do a rock, paper, scissors workflow, and here's the fun bit. You get to play too. Here's what we're going to do. The very first thing we're going to do is create ourselves a list to handle this kind of stuff. So let me go here to, let's see, view all site contents. Actually, yeah, I don't have to do that. I could have clicked on lists. But I need a new list in the worst possible way. So resolve like the wind, and let me make a custom list. And let's just call this RPS, or Rochambeau. Or do you guys spell it Rochambeaux? I'm not really sure how that works. I'm just going to do that. Rochambeau it is. Create the title field, that's fine. I'm going to have that stand in for the role of the challenger, the person who wants to throw rock, paper, or scissors first. And of course, they need to make a choice. Now, the first thing I want to do is make sure, well, two things. I want a user interface for this. We're talking about Nintex Forms. You want me to spend as much time as you want on it. Come to the booth. We are here all week. We love talking about this stuff. I'm going to use it as a means to an end right now and build a form around rock, paper, scissors. So I click here on Nintex Forms, and I will get the option to either customize the list form, or if we're using multiple content types, we can have different forms for that content type in this container. Now, we built a form really, really quickly out of metadata and laid it out according to rules that have been set up in a template. You can create more of your own. I don't care about attachments. Oh, everything can be dragged and dropped around to your heart's content, but I suspect you've seen people drag and drop things on a canvas before. We do it too. There. I need the title there because we need it. But the other thing I want to know is, what is your choice? And it occurs to me, oops, we need a column for the choice. That's all right. Actually, what are we called? Challenger choice. And this is a choice. This part is not particularly odd. It's been done many, many times before. But what I hope you're noticing is I'm editing the form and the list at the same time. Thing number one to think about in Nintex forms, it's part of SharePoint. In fact, serious geeks in the audience, take a look at that URL if you can read it. That's layouts. We're living in the layouts directory. This is made up out of application pages. For that reason, we install in 5-10 minutes tops. 5 of those 10 minutes will be creating an SQL Server database and maybe doing some configuration work. Heck, I'll pad it and say 15 minutes, but it's one MSI that delivers one WSP and installs in 15 minutes. This is really, really, really SharePoint. And I'm just going to do rock, paper, scissors. All right. Drop-down menu's fine. That'll actually look nicer on mobile devices. Excuse me. I have a cold, and if I'm coughing, I'm just going to apologize right now. Now, we have general form controls that I could manually bind if I want to. But I also have specific controls that talk to other parts of the SharePoint universe. Whoa. And here's where I can go ahead and throw in Challenger choice. And let's go ahead and stretch this out a little bit. And move it up here. I also need a label. By the way, if anyone in the audience has any lozenges or any kind of syrupy candy kind of thing, or even mints, and wanted to donate them to the cause, I'm certainly not going to object. Thank you. Jeff Shuey, everybody. One heck of a nice guy from Kodak. These are bona fide cough drops. I thought I might have had to suffice with lifesavers, which we'll do, but this is so much better. All right, let's double-click this to, let's just call this choice. Come here, save. All right. Now, had I had the presence of mind to create the column first, this would have been laid out for me. However, I thought it would be fun to edit the list while I'm editing the form. Now, here's the other thing we're going to do. Certainly, I'm creating a list item form inside of a SharePoint site, but I don't want to be the only, I don't want the only way to get this to be in SharePoint. I'm going to publish this to Nintex Live so that it's usable in the internet. I'm going to shorten the URL to make it nice and convenient. I'm going to allow anonymous access. I'll take up to 1,000 submissions. These are things we do to avoid denial of service attacks. And it's going to expire tomorrow. And now, let's publish while I cough. A couple of things are happening right now. First off, it's published the form already within a matter of seconds to SharePoint. The second thing is, it's gone ahead and created a URL. And if you guys want to get at this, let me copy it and open up Notepad again. Paste that in there. You guys want to hit this with your mobiles, your cell phones, and so on? Go ahead and do that. Let me start it myself. It looks like this. Don't worry. Bringing it back. There we go. By all means, start hitting this URL. Now, if you want to see what this looks like, heck, I'm going to go ahead and punch this in manually into one of those mobile devices made by one of those upstarts. Yeah. The idea here is we're able to make mobile forms for many, many different environments. By the way, this needs to be case sensitive. And I need to be slightly more legible in my type. I'll forward it to myself and open it that way. All right, let's put this down for a minute. This is what this looks like. I'm just going to put in Mike Fitz at live.com. I will cast rock and say this form was submitted successfully. In a few moments, it will indeed show up down here in this list. In the meantime, though, let me show you a couple of other things. This form is not just about desktops. With one click, there's a smartphone version. There's a Windows Phone version. There's an iPhone version, an Android version, and an iPad version. One click, extra rendering of the exact same stuff in other environments. Thank you. Now, if you do the work in desktop and put in the right fields and get it all right, we don't actually try to render the smartphone form until we need it. And what's more, if there's a control you'd use after the fact to enhance one of the layouts, that's okay. Here are all the controls in use in the other layouts in case you want to reuse them in other layouts. So for example, in a full desktop view, list attachments make sense. In a smartphone view, it probably doesn't because very few smartphones have local filing systems. So that's just a good thing. Let's go ahead and republish this. It's going to be the same URL. That won't change. We're slightly clever about that. And as soon as this pushes the form up to Nintex Live, we're good to go. And I've been emailed another copy of it, and it's the exact same URL. So if anyone out there has been able to type this in, raise your hand, please. You see in a form? Excellent. I'll flip over and do that. In fact, the very first thing I want to do is email this to myself. In fact, every email account I've got, just in case. Good. Okay, we'll look at that in a few moments. Now, go ahead, by the way, and post. Go ahead and cast your votes and so on. Perfectly okay for you to do that. I really want you to do that. So, multiple views, tightly integrated with SharePoint, and mobility with one click. Let's close this and let's see what you got. Whoa! Holland Rocks is your email address? Dude, what's that? All right, that's okay. Actually, I did leave it at title. I didn't rename it. That's my bad. Okay, not a problem. So, we've gone ahead and created a way to collect a bunch of submissions from other people. And you've got the form, which is good. Expect to submit something to it again in a few minutes. Now what I want to do is build a workflow around this. This isn't just about Nintex Forms. I'll show you other cool stuff about Nintex Forms in a little while. But workflow matters, certainly to us. And just like we plug in seamless... Oh, by the way, the forms you're looking at, they are not some special new kind of form environment. There's no extra runtime. These are SharePoint forms. They're ASP.NET files. SharePoint ASP.NET files. By the book, SharePoint ASP.NET files. No new paradigm, just a better way to design for the paradigm that Microsoft's already created for all of us. You can run these on anonymous sites. Yes, you can run these on anonymous sites. So if you want to put these on a public-facing SharePoint site, great. If you want to keep the site inside the firewall, great, because the forms can be published outside the firewall. I'm probably not being ultra clear when I say Nintex Live, and I apologize for that. I'm going to apologize while I cough. Now, Nintex Live is a service we introduced a few months ago that complements Nintex Workflow and now Nintex Forms. It is a cloud-hosted co-pilot with a bunch of collaboration services that help workflow applications. The thing we're using it here for is, if I publish a form to Nintex Live, we host it in Windows Azure. You can be completely disconnected from the SharePoint environment and connected to the form. We'll relay the information back to SharePoint in a completely private, quiet, well-behaved, by-the-book way. That's one big payoff to Nintex Live. You'll see another one in a few minutes. Now it's time to build a workflow to go with that form. This is Nintex workflow, and we ship with a bunch of templates in the box, and that's all well and good, but I'm canceling out of that. We're going to build this thing from the very, very, very beginning. Now, we ship with over 100 tools in the box. I'm not going to use a ton of them here. I'll use a few. But I am going to, let's see, what's the very first thing that's going to happen? I have a person, and then I have a, what else do I have? I've got their choice. And I need to present me with the option to respond to that. But at the same time, I need to be a little bit careful about it because, well, no, that's fine. Here's what I want to do. I'm going to give myself a task. And we're going to do a couple of things about this. First of all, we will assign it to the role I'm playing. I'm not actually logged in as myself. I'm playing the role of a fictional character named Eden Stafford. There we go. I'm not going to let Eden delegate. I am going to let Eden respond to this. This is a feature we've had for years called lazy approval, whereby when we notify you that you've been given a workflow task, we just let you reply to the notification message, and we'll parse your response and finish the task for you. We've loved mobility for a very, very, very long time, and we let you do it with simple email replies. We're going to kick this up a notch. So first off, I want to change approve to rock. And the next thing I want to do, actually, let's do lowercase. There we go. Let's go, instead of reject, let's make that paper. And then finally, name is scissors. Done and done. Store the outcome in a variable. We don't make you back out of what you're doing. I need to create a variable. It's not a problem. Here, let's call this Defender's Choice. Defender Choice. It's just a single line of text. Great. And now, whoops. That's a user error, but it's a fairly easy thing to recover from. Rock. Reject becomes paper. And then finally, scissors. And then, under assignees, again, we need to send this to Eden. The ultimate end game is you guys are going to be able to spam me throughout the duration of the entire presentation. So I'm going to hope that you are somewhat kind about not doing it like crazy once I get this underway. Okay, the outcome is going to be stored in a variable called Defender Choice. I don't really need anything else other than here in the task notification. Let's make the task notification a little bit more descriptive. Let's grab context information from the incoming request. Title challenges you. Rock. Actually, let's take that back. Rock, paper, or scissors. Okay, this is what I'm going to be notified with. So far, so good. But we're going to kick this up at least one notch. This is not going to go out over email. This is going to go out over instant messaging, or better still, whatever I have indicated I would prefer. It is entirely possible for me, for example, to go here to Nintex workflow settings, manage my notification preferences, and say how I would prefer to get my alerts. Much more efficient way to handle this kind of thing. And now it's normally drawing out all the paths for me. Here's another thing. We love the visual graphic metaphor, but it can get awfully confusing to figure out how to draw the lines properly. We draw everything for you. The workflow's got a start, it's got an end, and it's got places where you can decide what happens next. If you create an outcome with 3 choices, we draw them out for you, and you simply have to tell us what happens in there. It's a fill-in-the-blanks approach that adapts to the choices you make. You can't screw up the process flow. All you can do is forget to put something in a place where we tell you you have to do something, which is not really a big deal. Now here, remember, I just want to know the choice. I'm not going to really branch differently based on whether it's rock, paper, or scissors. So if you're doing that, I'm going to come here to Advanced Options and say, do not create branches. The only reason I asked this person a choice is so I can find out what the choice is. So far, so good. Now check this out. We're going to keep running this workflow a couple of different times. And I saved it. That could be an interim draft. And notice how we version these workflows. This now says version 0.1. Now I'm going to publish it. Submit it, it'll become version 1.0. We keep multiple versions around. In fact, if you have to revert to an old version, not a problem. If you've got some versions run, or if you have some workflows running and you update to a new version, all new stuff happens on the new version. The current workflows that are currently running, they're grandfathered until they finish. So we're publishing the workflow. We're done. Great. So let's come over here to Rochambeau, and let's take one of these workflows. Danny was the first to chime in. So we'll go here to Workflows, and we'll start this new workflow. Now, there's not much in here, but what I do want you to see is that in a matter of seconds, a little fun thing is going to happen. I'm going to get asked, Danny challenges you, rock, paper, or scissors? I will say rock. And it occurs to me, I can't receive, I know what I forgot to do. This is user error. My apologies. Back over here, I forgot to click lazy approval. I did actually remember to do that, but then I clicked away from it at the wrong time and lost that setting. So, publish workflow again. And there we go. Okay. Now, let's have Danny send me that one more time. Actually, no, it's Jan's turn. Or is it Jan? I'm not sure. This is a very international conference. This really could be just about anyone. All right, let's have this go again. And again, this time I should get an instant message notification in any second. Great, response required. That's what I want. This is an automated message. Are you available to complete a task now? I'll say yes. If I say no, I'll get this over email. Jan or Jan challenges me. Rock, paper, or scissors? Scissors. To complete my response, take that. I wasn't looking. I'm not really sure what the appropriate response would be. Paper? Oh, I actually chose the right thing. Okay, good. I guess that's kind of fun. All right, so there. That's another example of interactivity using facilities built into the Microsoft stack. So this started as a request from the internet using Nintex Forms and Nintex Live. It's being handled inside the firewall using a combination of Sharepoint and Link. Now we'll go ahead and push some results back onto the internet. And to use this, we'll use the other part of Nintex Live. Actually, no, we need to do two other things. We actually need to figure out who wins. That's probably a very good idea. Now, I said I would do everything at once. I think I might lose you guys if I do the following thing before your very eyes. This is a workflow, and it's a workflow where I've already figured out all the details. The very first thing I do is I convert the strings to lowercase for both the choice that the challenger makes and the choice that the defender makes. And then, let me zoom out a little bit so that you can see the whole thing. Don't worry if you can't read the stuff. I can't read it either. I'll tell you what's in it. But here is a switch where we find out what the challenger's choice was, rock, paper, or scissors. And then, depending on which one, we have branching logic where it's rock, paper, or scissors, and so on and so forth. And depending on the choice, we indicate that the winner is a tie, the winner is the challenger, or the winner is the defender. So it's just branching logic. And if you're curious as to how we draw that stuff out, Under logic and flow, we actually provide a lot of options. In other words, if you want to do looping, either normal looping or iterating through a collection, fine. If you want parallel activity, fine. If you want to do switching, great. If you want to do a full-blown state machine, a workflow with multiple stages where you can move back and forth amongst those conditions, that's all good too. There are over 100 activities here. That's a good thing in and of itself. Most of these are Windows Workflow Foundation custom activities. They're standard by the book Windows Workflow Foundation code. But this is special. This is what we call a user-defined action. It is a workflow, but it's a workflow with a title and a category and parameters. 2 inputs, 1 output. And so when I save this and publish it, I don't publish it to the catalog of available workflow items. I publish it right here to the toolbox. And I can use it like a sub-workflow or a piece or just something for calculation purposes. So now I've got the challenger choice, which comes from the item. And I also have the defender choice, which I get from a workflow variable. And all I need now is an extra variable to find out who the winner is. So let's go here to new. Let's just type in winner. It has no default value because we don't want to be biased. There, winner goes here. So that other workflow I created to be reused is going to take care of all those nasty details for me. So far, so good. The next thing, however, you just saw 3 different ways to add tools to the toolbox. Most of these things are code. Assign flexible task is code. This is what we call a user-defined action. And now here's the third thing that you can do. Let's go to the cloud. Remember how I said Nintex Live is a service we run in Windows Azure to make collaborative solutions more powerful? Well, one way is to host forms that are published with Nintex Forms. The second way is to locate and catalog and deal with all the nasties of dealing with a lot of cloud-hosted web services. Anyone ever tried to interact with Twitter's web service or Bing's or Google's or StrikeIron's or all that stuff? No hands going up. Okay, 1, 2, 3 hands going up. 4. Was it fun? Okay, thank you very much. For those of you that aren't plugged into this, the reason it is what that guy said is, well, it's not like being in the enterprise where you can just send out a request and get back a response. Everything is loosely coupled. So you might have to try several times. Twitter works this way. Or you might have to make a request, get back a token, and then submit it later to pick up your answer. Or you might have to submit a request, set up a callback service, and wait for it to call you. Lots of different permutations out there, and we know all of them. Lots of different ways of authenticating with web services out there. It's not just a matter of passing a username and a password a lot of the time. You need to set up OAuth, open authentication things, or live ID-based authentication techniques. All that stuff is out there. We've sorted through this kind of stuff. So, for example, if we want to be able to post on a Facebook wall, let's just add that to our toolbox. And if I want to put a list item into an Office 365 list, I can do that. Or if I want to go ahead and create sites, provision sites in Office 365, great. Office 365 provides a ton of different web services. It's very, very handy. We love that. We've embraced it in a big, big way. How about public or commercial web services? StrikeIron's in the business of verifying email or doing currency conversions or very clever things like sending out SMS alerts without necessarily knowing which carrier you've got. They've dealt with all of that. Twitter status updates, tweets, or searching Twitter? Yeah, let's just go crazy here. They're localized to your local area, but you can look at it globally if you choose to. Now, what's happening right now is we're bringing down little bits of XML metadata and dropping it into this category called Nintex Live. All of these represent cloud-hosted web services. None of this requires you to know any of the details of dealing with that, because as far as you're concerned, you want to tweet the identity of the winner, you drag and drop. If you want to add an item to a list, that's create a list. I don't really want that. Oh, no, this is create list item. It's just being cut off at the moment. There it is. I'm going to log a running tally of who wins up to this SharePoint site. This SharePoint site is being maintained in Office 365. Those of you that could see this URL could back me up on this. So here I go. I'm going to configure this correctly. Now, there are a number of fun challenges when dealing with Office 365's web services. Office 365 initially had an odd authentication mechanism, still does. It's a derivative of live IDs, but it's unique to Office 365. And it is, let me see. You need to have an interactive web-based logon in order to successfully use it. Let's see, what's the list name? I believe RPS results. Oh, right, I need to put some fields in there. So let's see. Title, we'll have the identity of the winner. That's text. And winner. And we should probably also have the identity of the challenger. That's also text. I could put in even what the two choices were, but let's, in the interests of moving this demo along, not do that. All right, those two fields are there. Actually, I can't remember whether I made them required, so I better do it. Challenger choice. And what was the other one? Let's see. Defender. Defender choice. Yep. Okay, the defender is always going to be me, or the character I'm playing in this demo. And the defender choice, I just need to look that up ever so quickly. That's a workflow variable. By the way, there's a ton of context information here that is very, very useful. But we'll come to that in just a second. Okay, filled all that out. A few last details about connecting to SharePoint Online. Let's see, SharePoint Online URL. What's my username at Nintex on Microsoft.com? Password is none of your guys' business. I think we're done. Oh, thank you. Thanks, guys. Appreciate that. Yes, that would have done wacky, wacky stuff, and my workflow would have errored for reasons that are comical and tragic. Okay. Here's the Twitter tweet. All we need to know is who's going to authorize it. I'll use my my Hotmail account, and then the tweet text is Rochambeau outcome with Rochambeau with, and then let's put in the identity. Where's title? I don't really need to keep popping up and popping down. I keep this up here to give you fewer things to deal with. Outcome. All right, that's it. I think that's enough. Well, I'm publishing, and that's well and good, but I need to go back for a second. I'm going to do two more things that are extremely convenient. Not just convenient, but extremely helpful for running this workflow. See how this workflow is taking a few moments to publish? That's well and good. SharePoint's checking my work to make sure that this workflow makes sense. Well, we're waiting for it to, there, it's checked my work. Now, here's the thing. If you trust us, we actually have thought this through already. In fact, we're validating the workflow constantly. So if you trust that we validated it correctly, the workflow will publish in a second or two. The second thing is I'm going to add an item to the drop-down list menu, the ECB, if you would. I'm also going to start this when a new item is created, so it's going to be automatic. And now let's save, and now let's publish, submit, and you'll see that this winds up being published in a matter of a second or so.
Mike, do you recommend saving before publishing? I've not done that.
The question is, do I recommend saving before publishing? It's not necessarily a bad idea, but saving just means publishing always saves first. Save saves but does not publish, and therefore it's for interim stuff. Minor versioning and version control speak, if you would. It's not a bad idea. It takes an extra second. It makes and turning on publish without validation basically makes a publish take as long as a save. All right, let's leave that up here. I've got a whole workflow here, and now, because I have said that runs automatically, would somebody please hit me with a new challenge? Whoa, I've been getting a lot of response. Okay, yeah, I'm ready. I've got more. Great. Jan, yeah, sure, Jan, fine. Rock. Ha! Okay. Oh boy, I've created a monster. Yes. Paper. Ha! Scissors. Oh, sorry. Yes. Ha! Okay, you guys can stop now, okay? Yeah, sure, rock, yeah, thanks. Okay, I'm going to stop this workflow. Now, we're going to let this stuff pile up, and I've created a freaking monster. You know what I'm going to do right now? I'm republishing this thing and turning off the automatic responses. You can keep queuing the stuff up. I no longer care. All right, we've got plenty of things, and let's go to the end. Sure, what the heck? One more. Paper. Stop. Okay. Wow, I think I need to sort this a little bit differently, or else this is going to take freaking forever. I'll tell you what we're going to do. 120, 150. I could edit the list to show a date column, but for some reason, for drama's sake, just paging through until I find the end of this list seems to be slightly more satisfying, although I may live to regret it. What the? Okay, I'm just going to have to take it on faith that it's calculating and so on, because this is crazy. All right, you know what? There are a couple of ways I can find out which workflows are currently running, but the truth of the matter is, eventually, I will come over here, and I will refresh this view, and I will see some stuff showing up here. There I am in Office 365, posted to, yep. Now here's the other fun bit. It's not going, this workflow is not allowed to post to Twitter yet. It really wants to. And it's asking me if it's okay for the workflow to act on my behalf. So I will authorize this app to behave like me. I logged on to Twitter a little while ago, so it remembers my logon. Yes, you can store this and use it for others. Great, go ahead. Let's get out of here. And so now that I've just authorized Twitter to act on my behalf, I suspect that unless something goes horribly, horribly wrong, which is not impossible, we should start. Okay, great. Challenger 1. And we'll see a couple more show up in a few moments, but that'll take a moment or two. And there, published to a public API, again through Nintex Live. We've got a workflow here that starts in the internet with a custom form, does work cleverly in SharePoint, calls on a reusable component that a human being, no, a non-coding human being made. Coders are human beings, I code. But without a single line of code, someone drew out a reusable component. That got used to decide who wins. We log stuff to Office 365. We publish things to a Twitter account. Workflow makes the world go round, and we make workflow really, really easy. That's my official full-on demo that I said I'd do without a net. And now I've got 15 minutes to show you a bunch of other stuff. But before I do, does anyone want to ask a question about the demo that I just completed?
That was awesome, Mike.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Wasn't a question, but I thank you for that all the same. Yes, sir, right over there.
We had a package workflow, which is a sub-workflow. Is that visible at site collection only?
Oh, those sub-workflows, the user-defined actions, you can scope those to a site collection, or to the entire farm. You can, in fact, start in a site and keep promoting it. And those can be exported to XML and then imported in other places. Now, if you guys are leaving, some of you are walking out. Remember, I'm not done. I'm just done with that demo. Let's put this out of the way. I want to show you some more fun stuff involving Nintex workflow. Yeah, this will be good. Nope, that's not the demo I intended. I want this demo. Now, this is a demo I do quite often because virtually everyone understands what it's like to ask for vacation time and such. Perfectly good, standard thing. And we've already shown you what it's like to fill out a demo. But the two things are going on here that I think I want to make sure you see. First thing is, there's a lot more data on here. We want this to be incredibly simple with Nintex Forms. There, full-on form, lots of stuff going on the screen, but we looked at all the metadata and laid something out as intelligently as possible. The last example was a very simple one-field form. This is considerably more ambitious. And what works on a desktop browser, well, that certainly will work on an iPad. But there, we've laid it out in a different and completely compatible way that works with smartphones, including Windows Phone, including an iPhone, including Android. Shown you that already, I just want to show you that it really works when things get a little stranger. The other thing I wanted you to see is that it's not like we don't, one-click form generation is a wonderful thing and will help a lot of people, but we leave you plenty of room to make this your own. Thing number one, if you want to use validation rules, great. I mean, we're not trying to become a code-based workflow environment that happens to generate ASP.NET forms. This is all webby, not codey. But that having been said, webby is still incredibly powerful. So if you want, you can make it so that this is a mandatory field. We grab the SharePoint list item metadata to make these choices at first, but then you can change them. Range validation, sure, I could always say that it's between a couple of different points, but I don't really want to do that. Regular expressions, yeah, that works too. Custom validation rules or comparing it to another column, absolutely that works. You can compare it to another control or just another hard abstract value. Custom validation, for those of you that just got to write some code, you can throw in some custom JavaScript. You can even call JSON if you want and go nuts with accessing stuff that lives in other places. We aren't anti-code, we're just anti-needing code. If you want to add custom HTML encoding, if you want to do formatting strings or masking, if you want client IDs to be manifested for this control so you can have one control manipulate another in JavaScript, do it. And certainly appearance things and cascading style sheet information, it's all there. It's just not necessary until you want it, because quick and easy is part of who it's wired into our DNA. Yes, sir? Can we put a form within a page? Well, I'll tell you what we can do. I mean, it's just an ASPX page. Of course you can put it inside of a page. But if you want this form to contain another thing, like for example, we've got multi-line text box, we have panels, we've got people pickers, we've got repeating sections. Here's a page viewer component. And the instructions that are passed there can come from anything you want. I mean, there's the frame source. And again, you can indicate whether it's resizable and a couple of other key details. But if you want to get very elaborate, not only won't we stop you, we'll totally endorse that. Now, I want to get out of this because this is just the form for an individual list item that's a bit more ambitious. Now, here's what I would rather show you. I want to go into the workflow associated with this list. And now I want to show you something a bit more fun. A workflow task form. And I didn't create one of these before because I was all about showing you interactivity with Link. That works over email too. But this is what I want to show you. Let's go down here to this activity. And here I've got, let's see, common manager, task description. This is a normal task. Oh, and manager, by the way, we're a big believer that adding extra steps to the workflow to do busy work makes the workflow hard to understand. In this workflow, I can back out of it conveniently. In this, because I haven't really changed anything yet. In this workflow, we're calculating business. We're finding out how much balance how many hours the person's accrued, whether or not they've earned the time to take off, and then we're going to get the manager's approval, and so on. Here, we're not adding step after step after step after step, including things like figure out who this person's manager is. The reason for that is over here in SharePoint Central Administration, under Nintex Workflow Management, we have this notion of context data. Think of these as roles. If you don't, we by default do an Active Directory lookup to figure out who your manager is, but if you don't like the way we figure it out, by all means, replace our component with yours and have it check the ERP system or the HR system or a database or a third-party LDAP service. You can do this work in the workflow, but it makes the workflow bigger than it should be if you want your users to understand it. And you can add other ones too, by the way. So if you want new context items like division or HR representative or things like that, absolutely. Question, sir?
Yeah, can you do that, what you just showed in Workflow 2007 as well as 2010?
The gentleman's question is custom context data available in Workflow 2007? No, it is not. That was a new thing that was done for 2010. We're still evolving 2007, by the way, but things that require what I would refer to as heroics will not make it back into 2007. Things that certainly, just for lack of doing the work, could be retrofitted into the 2007 version. We're doing that in good faith. But if it involves heroics, we'd rather try to help you migrate to 2010. By the way, our 2007 workflows just load into 2010 and keep going, including their current state. Where was I going with that? Back here to the workflow designer for the leave. I want a form for this, because I didn't show you what happens when you do a form on a workflow task, because this supercharges. Okay, we looked at the metadata around the task and once again in good faith threw everything on here. But here are a couple of things that really, really matter. We know all about the columns of the task, and the typical ones that matter a lot are thrown up here on the form. We also know everything about the list item we're doing the workflow to. So have you ever received something where it says, please approve the following item, and you get a link, and you're supposed to click on the link, go look at something, and when you're done, come back and then make a decision? Not anymore. You can embed all the details about the task item, like who the person is. I'm just going to write it over here because I'm assuming you guys will forgive me if I don't make it purdy this time. There's the person, the annual leave, the start date, and the end date, and I'm just going to leave it at that. Yes, sir, go ahead.
Can the list that you're acting on be a document library?
It can. We don't do lists, or, sorry, we don't do forms on document libraries, like list item forms. We don't do those for documents because you've got the document. But if you're doing a workflow on a document and you're doing a task form in Nintex forms, yes, all the properties of the document show up here, as long as they've been promoted. But yes, absolutely. All right, so here's where details about the request will be shown. Actually, we have a magic control that does that anyway, but still, this is fun to do it this way. So we know everything about the list. We know everything about the task. We know everything about the SharePoint environment we're working in. We can bring in master detail relationships with other lists. We can do nested lookups and so on. We also have access to all of the workflow variables. This form environment knows what workflow is. Nintex created it. This matters a lot because as we create all these forms for different form factors, we might want to change the behavior of the form based on data that the workflow fetched and examined. So all it needs to do is make a setting to a workflow variable, and the form adapts. All you need to do is change or supply some data for a workflow variable in the form, and the workflow will have it when the form is finished. The form and the workflow work together as a very nice team. They're powerful by themselves. They're extra powerful when you bring them together. Let's see. What was the other thing I really wanted to show you about this? And again, if you want to send this to somebody, the publishing environment is extra simple because you just have to say, do I want this to be published in Nintex Live, and should I shorten the URL? Because we already know who it's supposed to go to, and we'll email them and only them a link to that form. Very, very handy, handy stuff. All right, I'm not going to make... Let's see, did I uncheck that? Yes, I did. Good. Let's go ahead and publish this. I don't actually actively publish it right here because I'm just going to save it. Good. And now I'll close. And I'm right back here working on the Flexi task. Now what I'm going to do is publish the workflow. Why? Because the workflow contains all the form information. When we publish it, we'll generate the correct workflow data. We'll publish the form into the right places. We'll do all of it in one fell swoop. By the way, you want to export all of this and take it to another SharePoint environment? Just click Export. We export everything in one nice package. Make no mistake, if this is just a list item form, it'll export by itself, it publishes by itself, etc., etc. But here I publish, I click Submit, and because I said trust me, it should, oh no, it's taking extra time to publish the workflow because it's producing the form pages. There, still pretty quick. All right, let's go over here. I need to go into the leave requests list, and I'll submit a new, actually, I didn't publish the form, so I'm just going to restart this workflow on this particular item. Now, this is in this particular environment, we need to pay attention to two things. I am logged in. Oh, I need to log in as this guy's manager. So give me just a second to open up a remote desktop window to the same machine under the context of this guy's manager. Whoops. Catch up. There we go. Here's my notice that the annual leave request was received, which is good. Now, here I am logged in as this guy's manager. Outlook should load momentarily. There it is. And when it does, I should expect to see a request to approve this leave time. And it might not appear instantaneously, because this is still loading. This is actually calling another user-defined action that in this case calls out to a web service provided by the human resources system to look at my available pending balance. It then calls Excel services in order to do some funky calculations on the date and time math in order to bring me back some dates that are useful for laying the thing out in a SharePoint calendar. As soon as it got done, that refreshed. And here I have Eden Stafford's requesting annual leave, yada, yada, yada. All that's good. Normally, if for those of you that are familiar with Nintex workflow, I would just reply to this notice and say yes or okay or what have you. The same thing I was doing in the link client a little while ago. But I'm not going to do that because I want you to see the form. So let's open up Explorer. It looks fine in other browsers too. And take a look at that. Now this is all nice and pretty, other than the fact that I embedded fields from the request in a kind of random way. So take it on faith that if I had time, I actually possessed just enough design sense to lay that out in a much better way. But this is 100% functional. So I'm going to elect to approve this, and I will click OK now. And I could have pushed this form out to the internet and then filled it out on a mobile device, just like you guys were submitting Rochambeau challenges to me on your mobile devices. There, annual leave request was approved, life is good, and the world is in one piece. I still have 5 minutes, and I see no reason why I shouldn't use them. And then we've got 15 minutes for questions. But I will end this promptly when I'm supposed to, which means you get 15 minutes to pepper me with whichever questions you want. But I wanted you to see that. Now, are some of you not familiar with Nintex workflow, or you weren't until you walked in the door? It's totally okay, but if it's really only one or two of you, I'll ask you, okay, that's critical mass. Here's what I want you to see that you haven't seen yet. This is an example of what I believe is a really realistic situation, even though it might look esoteric. I said the word state machine a little while ago, and that sounds all funky and geeky and programming-y, and it is. But if we change the word state to stage, it becomes a lot easier to digest. This is a workflow that has multiple stages. Either the author is making revisions, the manager's approving it, the legal department is reviewing it, or it's being published. And you would be tempted to write a workflow that just moves it in a straight linear progression, but you'd be factoring out things that happen all the time. Like the manager could say it's approved, in which case it goes to the legal department, but the manager could also reject it, in which case it goes back to the author for changes. The author could make changes and then resubmit it, which means it goes back to the manager, or the author could retract it and just take the ball and go home and just forget about all of this. The legal department just doesn't simply approve and reject it. If they reject it, it goes back to the author with changes requested. If they request clarification, it goes back to the manager with questions and then comes back. If they approve it for publishing, then it can go on to being published. And thing number one is, this workflow basically says 4 stages, this is what can happen. The second thing about this that is really important is the process flow doesn't determine how this workflow works out. The choices that the users make determine how the workflow works out. And because you're modeling user choices as opposed to just what you think they're supposed to do, this can adapt, and this can run as long as it needs to, and you keep a log of everything that happened. It also helps you improve the process flow, because if it took 50 iterations, maybe the author isn't anticipating what's necessary, or maybe the legal department's too picky. That never happened. Also, it lets you add a 5th stage without completely throwing out the workflow and making the whole thing unintelligible. If you need the PR people to polish it and make it look nicer and make the wording nicer, fine. Drop that in where it makes sense, change a couple of the decision outcomes, and you're good to go. This isn't esoteric. This is actually real-world behavior that organizations and people in organizations make all the time, and we make it really easy to lay out. You want a state machine, all you need to do is say, right here, under logic and flow, I need me a state machine, and these are my states. We'll draw out the lines for you, and you just have to fill in the blanks. And if you want to change the state, you drop in a change state activity and indicate where it goes next. That's it. You want to create a workflow that models real user behavior? We'll help you out. Now, this one, I'm going to zoom out and make it really hard to read, but not because I don't like you guys. I'm opening this up so that you can see it's a lot of workflow logic doing a lot of things. What it's doing is making use of a lot of these activities that handle provisioning. This is an employee onboarding workflow. It's doing things like creating an Active Directory account and then adding that Active Directory account to users and provisioning mailboxes for them and activating link privileges on them and setting up a user profile and a My Site for them. And then it's doing things like scheduling their very first provisional review at a time both convenient to both the new employee and the hiring manager. And it waits until the very first day and then sends an email to the manager with all their login details and their first temporary password and all that stuff. It could even call out to a transaction processing environment like BizDoc Server or something else and procure an order to get them a laptop. All of those things can be governed by a workflow. Other things that I would think of as perfectly legitimate but potentially mundane to some of you would be a workflow that, who here's got self-service site creation turned on, which is really a misnomer. It's self-service site collection creation. But who's got it turned on? I'm seeing nobody with their hand raised. One person, two, three people, four. Okay, how many people are in the room? Don't count yourselves. A lot. Why do most of you have it turned off? At least two reasons. One, you don't want that to proliferate like crazy. And two, there's no way to put perfectly legitimate requests through some sort of approval or review process. Well, we can provision site collection some workflows, and if you give somebody a nice Nintex form to fill out, and bam, workflow starts, routes it around all the necessary people, they can make choices, and away you go. So that's one other example. How am I doing? We have dipped into Q&A time. So let's see. Because I said no slides, I can't put up the normal, thanks for coming, please fill out your review forms, et cetera, but please do all of that anyway. And I do thank you for coming. Thanks very much for your time. If you'd like to know more about Nintex products and our technology, by all means come down to our booth. We're here all week. And if you've got questions, fire away. Thanks. Yes, sir.
Do you get a visualization of this, of workflows and progress?
As a matter of fact, you do. With so much going on in so many products, I left a few steps out. Sorry about that. This is a visualization of a workflow currently in progress. In fact, since that's probably a little too easy, let me show you another workflow. Well, this is the one that was running, right? So let's go here, view workflow history. And that's the last one that was completed. Let's open that up. Here are all the steps. You can see the path it took. Now, that's interesting in and of itself. But if I click here to show you the detailed view, there's an audit trail, including the email exchange. No, I didn't do an email exchange that time. But had I replied with email to finish the task, all the email details would be in here. This is the other fun bit. View statistics. That's not just this time. That's every time the workflow has ever run. How long it takes on average, maximum, minimum. You can actually see how often the workflow broke to the right or to the left. You can see who approves and how long it takes them and whether or not they've got a bias towards saying yes or no or so on. You can analyze the heck out of this stuff. In fact, we also give you the ability to go big picture. So these are different kinds of sites and the degree of workflow that takes place in there. This is an audit trail of workflows in progress. How about a usage summary of the total amount of workflow activity going on at different points? How about, of all the people out there who have been given tasks to complete, who's having the most trouble keeping up? Or who's been given the most to do? Ultimately, this is all SharePoint workflow. We haven't introduced a new workflow engine of any kind. It's just SharePoint workflow. We just designed SharePoint workflows really well and know how to ask SharePoint to do things that it knows how to do, but normally you have to go to Visual Studio to ask. Our workflows are just XML. They're not code. When we publish them to SharePoint, it's just XML instructions that SharePoint carries out. And what we add are a ton of activities, a great design environment, and a lot of managerial and reporting layers on top of all of that, so you can really make SharePoint workflow shine in the enterprise. Yes? Yes? How am I handling what for audit? History for, oh, excellent question. Her question is, what do you do about handling history for audit purposes? And it's a very legitimate question because SharePoint, by default, kills the history after 60 days. And it doesn't log a ton of detail. We supplement SharePoint's logging. We don't interfere with it. We supplement that with parallel logging to an SQL Server database. We keep that around as long as you want. In fact, when we're analyzing this, the reason we can do this, we're certainly not looking at the workflow list in every site and every collection in the farm. Similarly, when we come over here and show you your pending workflow tasks and the status of every workflow you've started, no matter where they are, we're not checking every list in every site. We're going to the database and doing a quick query on all of that stuff. So because we also log things to SQL Server, we can mix, match, sort, and archive auditing information for a long period of time. That looks like it begets a second question.
You were showing the status of a workflow in the list.
Yes.
Is it just a column you select in the view, just like the workflow in the SharePoint
Yes.
platform?
Sorry, what was that last part?
When you showed the status of the approval,
Yes.
you're just selecting a column in the view, correct?
When I showed you the status of an approval, you mean like right here?
You're showing me the list, and you've got a workflow status column in the list. If you go back to the list.
Sorry. You mean the standard workflow status column that SharePoint creates for you? Yes.
Is it just like in the SharePoint world, you just selected it?
I see what you mean. No, this will take you to the SharePoint history, which is that SharePoint list that contains that information. To get the Nintex workflow history, you go to the Edit Control button, and you go here to View Workflow History, and then you get a lot more detail.
But that status is the Nintex status?
No, the status is the SharePoint status. We can't stop. Well, actually, we can tell SharePoint not to create that extra automatic column, and we could create a second column and keep it stocked manually with workflow steps. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Database or web service lookups in the form?
We can do database queries using ADO.NET. We can do SOAP web services, RESTful web services, LDAP queries. We've got specific support for CRM, specific support for BizTalk.
Question was related to forms, Nintex forms.
Oh, can Nintex forms call? Oh, actually, that's a really, really good question. We actually, as a matter of philosophy, we're not keen on the idea of burying a lot of think work into the user interface. We like separating the responsibility out between the tiers. So we want the workflow to do as much work as possible and have the form to visualize and collect data from it. We built a form environment that really favors a design pattern where you have the workflow retrieve stuff from a web service, put it in a workflow variable, and the form visualizes it. And then you do whatever you have to do, and then we've got the variable, and then the workflow can continue on. If you really need to do real-time querying of web services while a form's being filled out, we evolve the product every 3 months and release point releases that usually have a lot of significant value added to them. But you could do it when we ship, which is later this month. You can buy this product before Halloween. But that's not a correlation of any kind. But I am wearing orange and black, aren't I? But the thing I was going to say is you could always have JavaScript use JSON to make web service calls if it were truly necessary.
Can I design forms of an Office 365 list, or it has to be on-premise?
Okay, another excellent question. Can we publish these forms to Office 365? No, I'm afraid not. The APIs, the web services and everything that are necessary, it would require some trust that we don't have access to. So the extensibility paradigm doesn't work. This works great. If you want to involve Office 365, we have Nintex Live, which will do the heavy lifting and move data back and forth in an automated fashion. So hybrid solutions that involve online and on-premise, we're all over that. Pure online-only solutions, much, much harder to do for everyone. Yes, sir? Do we have some of these samples up on the web? Yes, there are a series of examples up on connect.nintex.com. And there's a link to connect.nintex.com at nintex.com. But Connect is kind of like our TechNet/MSDN site. We've got some examples there. If you want business value examples, they're right there on the normal website. Technical examples on the community website. Yes, sir? We are designing these workflows and these forms directly in SharePoint. You start in SharePoint, you stay in SharePoint, you never have to leave SharePoint or a browser. There's no software to install anywhere other than the 15-minute install on the server. And actually, only on one server. It's a MSI that deploys a WSP, so it's SharePoint deployment. Question over here.
Which forms, when you created the task form and you added the item fields,
Mm-hmm.
when I was
The question is, when I create a Nintex forms and I've got fields laid out in the form, are those read-only or can I make them read-write? Okay. When I had that form that combined the task with the item, are the items editable? The answer is, I'm not sure what happens. I believe it does not update the list item automatically in this. We had that spec'd. It's not testing well. We may defer it to 3 months down the road. We revise the thing periodically. We absolutely intend for that to happen. But as of this morning, it still wasn't passing testing, and we are shipping at the end of this month. In the meantime, you could always put that in workflow variables and have the workflow do the write back after the fact. Yes, sir?
Does Nintex Forms, is it an on-premise solution, or does it require Nintex Live?
Nintex Forms works completely happily as an on-premise solution. Nintex Live makes it just a whole lot better. And the thing I should probably mention is there's no downside to using Nintex Live. Nintex Live exists whether you want to use it or not. If you have a maintenance agreement with us, we refer to that as software assurance, but what it really is upgrade insurance plus support plus non-production licenses, and now plus a certain number of credits for using Nintex Live. So the price of publishing a form to Nintex, or for someone filling out a form on Nintex Live, is about 1 penny. But you get a lot of pennies from us as long as you've got a support contract. If you're doing a ton of work with it, yes, you'll need to give us some extra pennies eventually, and that's on a subscription basis. But you might as well use it because it's one click to publish a form to the cloud, and it's not going to cost you anything unless you start really, really liking it and using it, in which case it's probably saving you more than a penny per submission and worth it. Someone over here. Which version of SharePoint do we require? We have a version of workflow that works happily on SharePoint 2007, but everything I did this time works on 2010. If your question was, do we need Foundation or Server or an Enterprise Cal? It's a light-up story. Everything works on Foundation, but we've got activities and sub-facilities that take advantage of services that are native to SharePoint Server, and we even have some activities that take direct advantage of features that are only present in the eCal. We have a standard version and an enterprise Forms only comes in one version. Standard version and enterprise version apply to the workflow product. The difference is enterprise version has the ability to look, when I was looking at all workflows everywhere, that's an enterprise feature. The provisioning stuff, that's an enterprise feature, and support for protocols is in standard. So if you want to do LDAP or radio.net or SOAP or REST, fine, that's a basic right. But if you want built-in stuff that already knows exactly how to talk to Excel services and SharePoint Search and BCS and CRM and BizTalk and OCS and Link and so on and so forth. That's in the Enterprise Edition too. The price is basically a SharePoint consultant for 2 weeks per web front-end machine. We do not license per user. We license per web front-end server. Sorry? We don't, Nintex Forms does not use InfoPath. It's based on extending the ASP.NET forms that are native to SharePoint. However, Nintex Workflow happily works with either Nintex Forms or InfoPath, or custom forms that come from a third party as long as they've got a URL. We're happy either way. We can, in the middle of designing a task or a workflow startup form, invoke InfoPath, feed it the information it needs, you make the edits, and publish it back. We love InfoPath. We essentially have, InfoPath is excellent when you're talking about forms as documents and when you're talking about forms as applications. Nintex Forms is all about mobility, all about tight SharePoint and tight workflow integration, and all about quick and easy. 2 different business problems, 2 different form solutions. Yes?
If you have a bigger form with a lot more information, in InfoPath you have panes and you have views. Do you have something similar?
Do we have the concept of panes and views? We have panes. We do not have views in the current release. Again, there's going to be a certain point at our development where we focus on the things we care about the most, which is quick and easy and mobile and internet deployable and everything else, and not intrude on InfoPath territory. But UI conventions that are just too darn useful to ignore, yes, we already have regular panes that can be activated and deactivated, and we have repeaters to create repeating sections that will store their data in a text field as a block of XML. We will add some concept of pages or something to that effect. But at the moment, the notion of completely different views like InfoPath has, if there's enough clamoring from the user and partner community, it's highly likely because we like to think we listen to customers and partners. Yes, sir?
Nintex forms published to Nintex Live. How do they authenticate back to the
Excellent question. So if we publish something to Nintex Live and it requires authentication, how does that work? The way it typically works is that you'll be presented with an authentication prompt, which gives you 3 choices. You can provide us with, you can use your Live ID, a Google ID, or a Facebook ID, because all 3 of those public authentication providers allow you to register multiple email addresses. So for that reason, we'll go, as long as the correct thing is registered correctly, if it's assigned to you at yourcompany.com and that's one of your legal addresses on Facebook, authenticate with your Facebook address, and then we're all good.
How does the form engine connects back to your SharePoint server?
The Forms engine communicates with our SharePoint server over web services handled by timer jobs, SharePoint timer jobs.
Claims authentication or?
I'm sorry? Claims authentication, yes. Active Directory authentication, yes. Database authentication, yes. Whatever SharePoint wants, we use. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.